Worldwide on iHeartRadio. Kerry Woodham Mornings. Engaging conversation on Newstalk ZB.
Newstalk ZB, Kerry, sold up my rentals, would not consider another until we had a national government for at least 2 terms, so I'd have some surety. Frankly, I'm glad to be out of it. This government hates everyone. Landlords, farmers, nurses, doctors, business, hospo. Did I miss anyone, says Tim? Tony, a good morning to you.
Hi there. Yeah, I think I'd like to try to have a stab at this ideology that you were talking about. What is the ideology behind a lot of this? Because a lot of people, it's the same in the UK actually. They say, this is done for ideological reasons. But what is the ideology? And there's been some pretty good work on sussing that out actually. Originally back in 2017, The Guardian Andy Beckett wrote something called The Long Read about Accelerationism, how a fringe philosophy predicted the world we live in. And he's really talking about this as an aspect of Nietzschean philosophy in the universities, but it's basically about creating crises and how those crises can be used for massive financial benefit. I'm even thinking here about the arms lobby on wars and that sort of thing. But there is an analysis that's come out this October this year, the UK. The article's by Iain Davis with an I in it, that's IAIN, from the UK column, saying accelerating towards the dark Enlightenment. And I think this, you have to look at some of the world leaders. We have the same sort of thing going on in the UK, where you've got all these people who are young global leaders from the World Economic Forum. You've got the Rhodes Scholars. Our own mayor in Bristol is a Yale World Fellow. So these are people who have been tapped up at a young age to take over leadership roles. So I think there is a philosophy behind it. And what's happening is, slowly but surely, some writers and thinkers and analysts are taking a stab at why is it that so many leaders around the world seem to be pushing us towards these various different crises. And I mean, you're talking about property here, but what you've got really is the crisis in the financial world is making it much more difficult, and the increase in mortgage rates for people to afford housing. What happens then is your housing market starts to tank. Oh dear, people can't afford to buy houses. And you know what? Governments get very upset, and financial people, when the housing market starts to crash. Right? So what they need to do is they need to bring in loads and loads of migrants in order to boost the demand for housing to keep the prices up. But this isn't really dealing with the roots of the problem at all. So I just suggest, you and your listeners have a look at accelerationism, particularly this article that came out in October, which does a very good job, I think, at drilling down into exactly what, we've got a sixth sense, I think, that, our leaders don't seem to be acting in our interests as much as they were, say, 30, 40 years ago. And it might just be that there is money to be made in creating these crises.
And is it, as many people have said, the fact that the government wants people to be dependent on them? Like, if you can't afford a home to live in of your own, you are then dependent on the state.
Yeah, definitely. And it's quite obvious to me, and we've seen this more and more in the UK, that work is no longer a route out of poverty. Here, the wages are a lot better. But, we've got so many people dependent on food banks who are actually in full-time work now. So the economy has been set up, first of all, to get both parents have to go out to full-time work, which it wasn't like that when I was a kid. And now they're saying even if they're both at full-time work, they still can't afford to pay the mortgage. So that everything's being weighed on the family. And ultimately, of course, it makes sense for a lot of people, and I don't blame them for this, to say, well, I've had enough of this. This is happening all the time in the UK. I can't cope with a 0 hours contract where I'm not sure how much work I'm going to get and how much income I'm going. I'm just going to fall back on the what they call universal credit in the UK, which is a sort of social security, because it's far more reliable. And I need to know a bit more. An old friend of mine who I worked with back in the 1990s said to me the other day, she said, it's the first time I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I can't plan for the future.
Yeah.
The first time in my life.
I know, I kind of understand that. But somebody has to work to create the money for people to live on.
Well, of course. But what you've got now is you've got a big... George Orwell wrote about this, right?
Yeah.
is the characters, there's many people out there who are just simply getting an income from their shares and their investments. Anyone that's got Shell or oil company shares at the moment, may not be boasting about it down at the local coffee shop, but their dividends have doubled in the last year. So, you're in a situation now where if you've got the right kind of share investments, you just don't have to work again. Simple as that. And I think this is the way society is dividing into the people who are actually doing useful work, useful production, and those who are basically, it's a horrible word to use, but they're parasiting off the rest of us. As everything gets privatised to these big oil companies, that money is going from the people that are doing the work straight into the pockets just because they happen to have the money to invest in Shell. I'm sounding almost like a marketing guy to Shell here, and I don't want people to do that. But, there's lots and lots of people out there who are doing the work for the very few who don't do anything, really.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. Newstalk ZB.
Newstalk ZB Auckland. Time. Newstalk ZB headlines.
Russia is emphatically denying it's launched missiles that have landed in Poland. Authorities are investigating reports 2 people have been killed on a farm near the Ukraine border by suspected Russia rockets or missiles. NATO member states have reiterated their commitment to protecting NATO territory. COVID protective measures could ramp back up again if more infectious variants emerging overseas take hold here. Daily COVID cases went over 4,000 yesterday for the first time since August. One person has died after a crash on Dunedin.